The Brandon Aiyuk saga is officially over. So today, let's put a bow on this entire thing here and let's go back and kind of break down everything that happened and what is going to come forward here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. What happens next for the Pittsburgh Steelers now that Aiyuk is officially locked up long-term in San Francisco? First up, we'll talk about how the Aiyuk deal went down, how close the Steelers got to actually landing the All-Pro wide receiver. Then we'll look back at, a trade that was definitely controversial at the time and definitely looking back in hindsight, probably was a big mistake by Omar Khan, the Deontay Johnson trade. Then I'll also go into what happens now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are they going to go get another receiver? Are they going to stick with what they have now? I'll talk about that, and then we'll finish up the show with some potential wide receiver targets that the Steelers could still get right now if they want to make a move before the start of the 2024 season. But before we get into everything today, guys, go down there in the comments section and get us started. Grade the 2024 Steelers offseason. Everything from signing Russell Wilson to free agency to the draft to not landing Aiyuk. Grade the overall 2024 offseason for the black and gold. Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. For me personally, I'm going to give it about a B. Let me know what you guys are thinking down there in the comments section. So let's start here with Brandon Aiyuk here. And I know you guys are tired of the Aiyuk stuff, but I just kind of want to put a bow on things here and kind of break down how this entire saga came to a close yesterday. So from the beginning here, it was always Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers' first option to come to an agreement on a long-term extension. Now, obviously, it got drug out. Aiyuk wanted a lot of money. San Francisco didn't quite want to give him that kind of money, at least at the beginning. And, they both wanted to get a deal done. Aiyuk wants to play for a team that's clearly competing for Super Bowls, and the team that's competing for that Super Bowl, San Francisco 49ers, clearly wanted to bring him back because he is their number one receiver. So essentially the trade offer that Omar Khan gave to the 49ers looked like this: a second-round pick and a third-round pick in 2025 in exchange for Brandon Aiyuk, and this was a take-it-or-leave-it style of offer from Omar Khan. He made this offer a couple of weeks ago, and he said, this is what we're offering. We're not going to give you George Pickens. We're not going to give you Alex Highsmith. We're not going to give you any players. You guys can either take a second and a third-round pick for Aiyuk, or you guys can do something else. So that's pretty much what Omar Khan did, and San Francisco was kind of willing to do that if they were able to land a wide receiver, which was the missing piece in this deal. The only receiver, or the only receiving weapons, I should say, that San Francisco wanted from Pittsburgh were George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. The Steelers were not willing to deal any of those guys to the 49ers, so the missing piece then was the San Francisco 49ers had to go out and try to come up with a deal with another team to find a wide receiver to replace Aiyuk. Because think about it this way, man. San Francisco is a team that really feels like they can win a Super Bowl this year. They feel like it was an absolute nothing burger here. They absolutely could not deal Brandon Aiyuk away from the team without getting a serviceable starting receiver to replace him. So San Francisco went searching for that kind of wide receiver, but because the draft had already gone by and, post-June 1st cuts and all that stuff already went by, it was very hard to find a wide receiver to their liking at that point. They did make an offer to the Denver Broncos, according to Diana Rossini, for a third-round pick in 2025. So essentially the 49ers would be getting Courtland Sutton and a second-round pick from the Steelers, and then the Broncos would be getting Pittsburgh's 2025 third-round pick. However, Denver stuck to their guns, and they rejected that offer, opting to keep Courtland Sutton after trading Jerry Jeudy to the Cleveland Browns earlier this offseason. And, Pittsburgh, as I said earlier this week, they did feel good that San Francisco would eventually find a trade partner and eventually find a wide receiver to their liking. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. San Francisco couldn't find that wide receiver, and eventually they just said, you know what, man, we're not going to find a wide receiver that we like on the trade market, so we're just going to bite the bullet, and we're going to pay Brandon Aiyuk what he wants. And that's exactly what ended up happening. San Francisco caved, and they gave him the $30 million per season that he was looking for, and now Brandon Aiyuk will be staying in the Bay on a 4-year, $120 million contract extension, with $76 million of that being guaranteed. A lot of it is up front as well, so that's going to help out with the Brock Purdy situation that they have coming up in the future. So overall, 49ers are happy, Brandon Aiyuk is happy, and both parties get what they wanted from the beginning. But from the Pittsburgh Steelers perspective here, it really does suck that you got that close, right? If the Denver Broncos accept that trade offer, a third-round pick for Courtland Sutton, which, by the way, is a pretty fair offer if you ask me, we'd be talking about Brandon Aiyuk being a Pittsburgh Steeler right now. So the fact that the Steelers were that close definitely sucks. But at the end of the day here, as I'll discuss later in today's show, I think the Steelers feel pretty comfortable with where they're at. Now sound off for me down there in the comments section. What was your one-word reaction yesterday when you saw the news break that Brandon Aiyuk was extended by the San Francisco 49ers? Let me know down there in the comments section for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question with your one-word reaction. Now, shifting over to what I think was the biggest blunder, not only of this offseason from Steelers GM Omar Khan, but in Omar's entire career as the Steelers GM, and that was the Deontay Johnson trade. Pretty much trading him to the Carolina Panthers for pretty much nothing. And a hard truth that Steelers fans are going to have to swallow here is that, if Deontay was on this roster and they didn't trade him for practically nothing, Aiyuk could probably be a Pittsburgh Steeler right now. So here is what the Deontay trade looked like here. So you got Deontay Jackson and a 2025 sixth-round pick, which ended up being Logan Lee. And then the Panthers got Deontay and a seventh-round pick from the Steelers. So pretty much you traded Deontay Johnson, arguably your number one most productive receiver from years past, for pretty much nothing because Deontay Jackson, it was well reported, was likely going to be cut by the Carolina Panthers because of cap reasons. He had been injured. He had had inconsistent performance on the field. Now, I'm not against the Steelers bringing in Deontay. I think he actually had a really good training camp in preseason, and I think he's going to be a really good number 2 corner for the Steelers this year. But you could have had him for a much lower price on the free agency market if you would have just waited, and then you could have traded Deontay Johnson to the 49ers as that wide receiver in this Brandon Aiyuk trade. I mean, this is what it could have looked like here if they would have just hung on to Deontay Johnson. You could have traded Deontay and a second-round pick in 2025 to the 49ers. That's what they wanted. They wanted a second-rounder and a wide receiver to replace Aiyuk. If you would have had Johnson, you would have had that missing piece, and then the Steelers would have gotten Brandon Aiyuk, and you still could have gotten Deontay Jackson in free agency. So I know that hindsight is 2020, but that is definitely a big blunder in hindsight for Omar Khan. He 100% botched that situation, giving up Deontay Johnson, a very valuable trade piece, in my opinion, for somebody in Deontay Jackson where you pretty much could have had him for free on the free agency market, didn't have to give up draft capital, didn't have to give up Deontay. And of course, if you have Deontay as a trade piece, I think that Aiyuk would have been on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster probably back towards the draft. I think it would have gotten done if that were the case. But unfortunately, Omar dealt Deontay for pretty much peanuts, and that definitely came back to backfire on the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. And in my opinion, that is the biggest blunder of Omar Khan's career as the GM of this team to this point in his career. Still love him, but you have to look at it objectively here. It was definitely a bad situation. So the big question moving forward for the Pittsburgh Steelers, now that Brandon Aiyuk is officially locked up long-term in the Bay, what happens now? I'm going to answer that question here in just a second, but first let's have a word from our sponsor at BetUS. BetUS is back as a sponsor here on Steelers Talk, and you can take advantage of their 125% deposit bonus when you go to chatsports.com/bet and use promo code Steelers125. And what that deposit bonus means, guys, is if you put in any amount of money, so let's say you put in $100, 125% of that money, $125 is given back to you to use on your bets. And why not use that $225 to get you started on Week 1 Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Atlanta Falcons? Right now, the total over-under is at 41 points. Personally, I'd probably be taking the over on that personally. And then the Falcons are currently favored at -3. So you guys can get your bets in today for Week 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers and take advantage of this awesome deal, 125% deposit bonus with our friends at BetUS when you use promo code Steelers125 at chatsports.com/bet. Now, the answer to that question is likely nothing in terms of what the Steelers are going to do. I think the Steelers, I said it on yesterday's show on the Breaking News Show, guys, I think the Steelers feel very comfortable with what they have in the wide receiver room. Now, you can disagree with them, and you can say Van Jefferson stinks, and Calvin Austin III stink, and Roman Wilson stinks. And, you can certainly make that argument at this point. There's definitely a lot of question marks in this wide receiver room at this point, but they did get Brandon Johnson to be on their practice squad. He does have some nice chemistry with Russell Wilson. George Pickens is a legit number one receiver, in my opinion, and they do like Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, and Roman Wilson because those are guys that can get open down the field, all right? All of them are very fast. All of them are very good route runners down the field, and this is a Steelers offense that's less about kind of being elite route runners in the short and intermediate part of the field. It's more about getting open down the field so Russell Wilson can use his excellent deep ball to make big splash plays in the passing game off of play action. And I think it's important to remember here, Steelers fans, given the run-heavy nature of Arthur Smith's offense, the success of this offense this year was always going to largely depend on the run game, not the wide receivers. If this run game was bad this year, it doesn't matter if you have Brandon Aiyuk or not. This offense is not going to work without having one of the best running back duos in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren and the offensive line doing their thing. Because you look at Arthur Smith and his past, look at what the 2020 Tennessee Titans wide receiver room looked like. You had A.J. Brown, who was a legit star. That could be the George Pickens role. Then you had Corey Davis, and if you're telling me that Van Jefferson, somebody that's over 200 pounds, somebody that runs a 4.39, somebody that's a legit deep threat can't play the Corey Davis role in this offense, I think you're pretty much crazy. And I actually like the depth of the Steelers depth chart more than the Tennessee Titans in 2020. And you have to remember, this is a team in the Tennessee Titans in 2020 that was a number one seed in the AFC. And look at the kind of numbers that Ryan Tannehill was able to get with these wide receivers in this offense. 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Tannehill has never even gotten close to these kinds of numbers outside of the Arthur Smith offense. And you take a look at the offensive stats from that season, they were still one of the most effective offenses in the National Football League that year because they had a dominant run game, right? You had King Henry, you had Derrick Henry leading the way there. Now, the big question for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be, can they replicate that kind of production? They're hoping that Najee Harris can kind of be the bruising running back that Derrick Henry was, and then they're hoping Jaylen Warren can be the kind of electricity factor that, of course, Derrick Henry brought to the table. The Steelers are hoping that their running back duo can kind of replicate what Arthur Smith was able to do in Tennessee, and that has always been the big question for the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into this year. Will this run game be able to dominate? If they can, I think this wide receiver room is more than good enough to have success on offense this year. If it's not good enough, it wouldn't have mattered if you would have gotten Brandon Aiyuk, because the foundation of this offense is the run game, and that is still the case heading into week one as we stand here today. So let me know down there in the comments section, is the Steelers' run game good enough right now to drive the offense to success this year? Give me a yes or give me a no. Let me know your guys' thoughts down there in the comments section. I certainly hope that this offense is good enough and this run game is good enough to drive the offense, but I guess only time will tell at this point. Also, I would say now that the Aiyuk deal is done, look out for a potential Pat Freiermuth extension. The team and Muth's representation have been in contact this entire training camp and entire offseason trying to work something out. And now that you're not paying Brandon Aiyuk, you do have some money to be able to spend on a Freiermuth extension. Now, I know that he's been a little bit hurt and he hasn't been the most productive in the world, but I think that, in this offense, he's a really good fit and he's going to be a very valuable piece to the Steelers this year. Here are the highest paid tight ends in the National Football League. So I would expect his extension to be somewhere in the $14 million range per year. I don't think he's going to make top dollar because I don't think the production that he's had necessarily warrants that. But I think a nice extension would be good here for Freiermuth if you can get him at the right price. Now make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you love Moose, just like I do, man. Penn State legend, now a Pittsburgh Steeler, and he's been very reliable and very solid when he's been on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hopefully he can have a breakout season this year. Now, before I go here, I did promise you guys some wide receiver targets. Now, like I said, it's definitely possible that the Steelers just stay put with the wide receivers that they have right now, because I think that the skill sets of the guys in the building, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, fit what they want. But the best available wide receivers either on a practice squad right now or in free agency, Tim Patrick, Isaiah Hodgins, and Michael Thomas, I think are probably the best available. You could also bring back Miles Boykin, especially if you need special teams help. Mitchell Tinsley is an interesting name on the Commanders practice squad. Sterling Shepard, always hurt, but an intriguing route runner. Russell Gage is somebody that's played a lot in the Arthur Smith offense. He's one of Arthur Smith's guys, so watch out for Russell Gage. Colin Johnson had a really good game in the Hall of Fame game. I thought he had some really nice catches, contested catches, getting open, route running looked good from him. You could poach him from Chicago's practice squad. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones and Al Robinson are also available on practice squads. And I'll also throw in Hunter Renfrow as well, former Las Vegas Raiders player that's currently a free agent. I'm not really sure if I want to go get any of those guys, and honestly, if I'm going to get one of these players, it's probably going to be Tim Patrick, Isaiah Hodgins, or Michael Thomas. Now, the only thing about those guys is that they're very similar type of receivers. They're bigger guys, but they don't really get down the field. They're not fast. They don't have good long speed. They don't create separation deep down the field. And I think that's kind of what Arthur Smith wants out of his wide receiver room this year. And they kind of feel like Pat Freiermuth is that possession type receiver. They kind of feel like George Pickens can be a type of security blanket for Russell Wilson. They want Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, and Roman Wilson. Their guys' jobs is to get things going deep down the field. Okay, so that's what I think is going to happen, and I think they're probably going to stick with what they have before the season begins. Now, the more likely option for the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion, is that they're probably going to go out and try to get something during the trade deadline, okay? Like, they're going to go into the season with this group right here, and if Van Jefferson isn't good, if Calvin Austin III doesn't break out, if Roman Wilson takes a while to get his feet wet in the National Football League, I think that the goal is going to be to buy a wide receiver at the trade deadline as opposed to getting a Tim Patrick, a Michael Thomas, or an Isaiah Hodgins off the practice squad before the season begins. There's definitely going to be some intriguing names that could be coming up during the trade deadline. I've seen Davante Adams be thrown around quite a bit. If he demands a trade out of Las Vegas, which is more than possible at this point, definitely keep your eye on Davante. But DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that I would keep my eye on as well. Same thing with Chris Godwin. They're both on expiring contracts. Darius Slayton is another guy that could potentially be dealt if the Giants are selling at the deadline, which I think they will be. Keenan Allen, he is on a one-year contract, and the Bears have two really nice receivers in DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, so they might be looking to sell if Chicago is losing games. John Mechie and Robert Woods are two guys that you could maybe get at a lower price at the deadline. So let me know down there in the comments section, who would you guys trade for out of that group at the trade deadline? And then also let me know your confidence level in the Steelers wide receiver room right now. Put it on a scale of 0 to 10 for me. Personally, I'm at about a 6.5 maybe. Like I've said before, this offense and the success of this offense is going to run through how well the run game goes. But at the end of the day here, guys, I think that the wide receiver room, the Steelers feel pretty comfortable with right now. So make sure you guys type those real ones in the comments section if you haven't already. If you made it to the end of today's show, I know it was a little bit of a longer one, but I wanted to kind of put a bow on the Brandon Aiyuk saga here, and just so we can move on, kind of recap everything, and now we can move forward as a fan base and as a football team here, heading towards week 1 against the Atlanta Falcons. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button for extensive Steelers coverage every single day here on YouTube for free. We have breaking news coverage just like we had yesterday when the Aiyuk news broke. We have weekly live shows plus a weekly live watch party for every single Steelers game. And we got over 57,000 Yinzers already subscribed to the channel. So if you love this kind of Steelers content, you want more of it every single day, make sure you click that subscribe button right now.